'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven.
A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UENradio.com.
Welcome to the National Safe Child Show, addressing the health, safety, and welfare of all children nationwide, because it shouldn't hurt to be a child. Here is your host, Tammy Stefano.
Hi, folks. Music to our ears. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the National Safe Child Show. I want to jump right in because I had some difficulties with my technology. So I want to introduce a lovely woman who has been on the forefront of addressing some serious issues that really affect so many relationships around the world, but specifically we're going to address the U.S. We have Dr. Debra Wingfield on the line with us. Dr. Wingfield, are you on with us?
I am, and thank you, Tammy, for inviting me to join you.
Thank you for joining us. It's my honor for sure. So why don't we start off, because we've lost a little bit of time, if you would just tell the audience briefly about your background and introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I've been working in the field of abuse across the lifespan for over 40 years now. And since the early 90s, I started focusing on domestic violence and have gone through many of the changes that have occurred as domestic violence has been identified and brought forth to the general public. And some of the changes that have occurred have been great, and some of the changes that still need to happen are progressing slowly.
Right. I think anybody that is familiar with the DV world would share that mindset with you. So you teach therapists, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You have years and years of experience. You are an author of several different books, and we're going to delve into your latest book in a little while because it's a fabulous book, and everybody should read it. You have an understanding of coercive control that the people within relationships experience so much. And it has brought you to an understanding that you share with people so that they don't go into these relationships and find themselves facing abuse. Could you explain coercive control or coercive control freaks who kind of mask their identity until, the victim is well into the relationship? And how do we recognize, so many women that I speak with, and I'm sure you speak with, certainly more than me, and men. I don't want to leave out men because I know men that have been abused as well. But so many of these people in these relationships, they feel like they met their perfect match, and then they're in the throes of hell, and then they have no idea how to get out, how to be free. What happens there? Why can't they get out when they start to see the abuse happen?
So let's start back with your first question, Tammy.
Okay.
What is it that the abuser does that pulls the victim into this relationship?
Yes, good.
And how is she blindsided? And I'm going to say she because it's more men who are abusers than women. And we can get into some of the specifics as we go along today. But it's easier if we just use one gender rather than
Okay,
trying
no
to
problem.
use he, she.
That's okay.
Okay?
That's fine.
So these individuals have 4 motivations that I've identified
Okay.
that really move them to build a relationship with someone who they see as vulnerable and that they can take as a hostage. And it's really important to understand that the hostage taking is so subtle that very often the individual who gets sucked into that web of the abuser doesn't see it until it's so far down the road that then all of a sudden things are really starting to be right in their face.
Right.
So
Okay.
they're very cunning,
Okay.
and they work at lulling the victim, and we'll just use that terminology for ease of use here, or the hostage. They lull her into a sense of security and safety. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be there for you. I'll protect you from all of these outside harms. And so she says, oh, this is great because I've spent years trying to find a way to be protected from outside harm.
Right.
When, in fact, no one has given her the tools to protect herself.
Okay.
So the abuser actually exploits that vulnerability with her.
Can they, I mean, it's almost like abusers can sniff it out.
Oh, they can.
They can.
And so we have to, that's part of what we have to empower women to be able to understand the red flags that come up way before they commit to a relationship.
Okay.
And it's hard to see those if you don't have any way to name it. Now, some abusers are very conning, and what they do is they con the woman into believing that they really love them and that they are soulmates, they're the only one for them.
Right.
And, you know, we're going to live happily ever after, the romantic dream, the wonderful Hallmark movies, and life is going to be wonderful.
Okay.
Okay. Now, then we have convincing abusers that are actually convincing this woman or the hostage that they have conned into believing them that they will take care of them. They want to take care of them. They will rescue them. They'll be there for them through thick and thin.
It almost sounds the same, Dr. Deborah. As far as the first category and the second, what differentiates the two?
Well, what differentiates them is they use that cunning to get to her. Then they convince her that what they've said and done is her reality. So they're using all of these
different tactics.
Motivations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
To get to her and then to reinforce for her that this is what's going to happen.
Okay.
And then they turn on the charm.
Okay.
And they do everything that they can to give her the relationship that she's always dreamed of. Flowers.
At this point, they're
dinners.
trying. Okay. They're giving all of their effort at this point.
Right.
If you had to tell, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If there was a time, like a kind of a generic timeline that we could, hypothetically create, what does it seem like that timeline would be? How long would they put their best foot forward? The flowers, the dining, the love, the caring, the hugs.
That's a really hard question, Tammy, because everyone responds differently to someone else in a relationship.
Okay.
And it's not so much the timeline that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of how they're manipulating and how they're inserting their own control at that point in time over her life.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I tell women that I work with who are in the throes of getting into a relationship is I say, how much do you actually know about this person versus how much does he know about you?
Right.
And if he knows everything there is to know about her own private thoughts, her own concerns, her worries, all of that, and she goes, well, I really don't know much about him. I know he drives this car, he lives here, he works there, but I don't know what makes him tick on the inside. What he's doing is he's managing an image to be able to pull her in to his web.
Okay.
And until he gets her pulled into that web, she never sees the real person. All she sees is the image. And I can relate this back to an incident that I had with someone that I had met. And we agreed to go to dinner, and we sat there and we talked for a couple of hours. And afterwards, I went home and I walked in the door and I'm going like, wow, I know absolutely nothing about this man.
You just spent a whole evening, and you realized that at the end of the evening.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm going like, that was a red flag. And I said, nope, I'm not going out with him again.
Do you ever, when you realize that at the end of the evening, or other, when women realize that, do you ever find that they question themselves and say, gee, why didn't I ask? I guess I just didn't ask enough. I was so busy. I shouldn't have been so selfish and just self-centered and spoke only about my interests. Do you ever find that type of mindset takes over when in fact it wasn't really that? It was in fact him masking himself? Or is that just not something? I mean, I'm just brainstorming, trying to envision this.
Mm-hmm. Well, initially she may realize that she's shared all this with him.
Okay.
On the other hand, she may not, because what he's done is he's created an atmosphere and an environment around her that makes her feel that someone really cares about her and is paying attention to her.
Right.
And the way that he gets past that vulnerability of hers is she's so grateful that this is the first time somebody was really interested in me, instead of talking about themselves, that she just opens herself up.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so she may not walk away from that saying, wow, I shared a whole bunch of stuff and he didn't share anything, unless she's been given some tools about building healthy relationships. At which point she's going to look at that and say, wow, okay, so this guy knows everything he can about me and I know nothing about him. That's like this huge red flag.
Okay.
And so what the abuser is doing during that time is the abuser is not only monitoring what she's saying, he's monitoring how she's saying it, what has emotional impact on her, what doesn't, how he can then turn things around and twist them to make it look like she's the one who wanted to talk all about herself.
Right.
And he actually puts that narcissistic orientation on her.
Sure.
When in fact what he's doing is he's hiding his narcissism from her, or he's hiding his antisocial personality from her, because he can't afford for her to get to really know him before he's sunk the hook.
Do they have a good radar for when that hook is in?
They do.
They do.
And it's one of those things that's very covert. It's like reeling in a fish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just slowly reel that fish in, and if the fish starts to pull or tug on the line, you give it a little bit of room
leeway
to pull.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've been fishing. Yep, I'm a fisher. I understand how to really reel them in. And if you pull too much, you lose the hook isn't in tight and the fish goes. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So once she's hooked and she's made a commitment to him, then he starts his manipulation, his domination, and creates an atmosphere of fear with her of the consequences if she doesn't comply with his demands.
At this point, would it be fair to say that he has used some physical, that he's done something physically that was abusive? Or not yet? They're still in that grooming kind of stage?
Not yet.
Okay.
Still grooming, still getting her ready.
Okay.
Because she's not caught in his web yet.
Okay.
And until he knows for sure that she's stuck in the web, and if you've ever watched a spider catch a bug in their web, you know, it's like they play it. They don't.
Yeah, it's so calculating. It's really amazing to watch it. So so to compare it to that makes sense.
Right. So once she's hooked, then the fear builds up inside of her to the point of very often terror. I hear women say all the time, I was terrified to stand up to him. I was so afraid of the consequences if I did that I just complied. And he can intimate that if she doesn't comply, then he'll go to the physical.
Wow.
And what we really look at with many of these men is they are not using physical abuse all the time, with some exceptions. And I certainly have women that have said almost from the very beginning of them moving in together, the physical abuse started and the sexual assault started. But until they get to the point where he doesn't feel he has control by use of verbalizations towards her, tearing her down, using demeaning and discounting words with her, calling her all kinds of names, which I'm not going to
Right.
specifically say on air.
Right.
Then what happens is he'll start making physical threats that are not necessarily on her body. So he may threaten to punch her in the face by punching a hole in the wall right next to her head.
Mm.
And so she's going like, if I don't comply,
That could be my head. Yeah, that'll be me. Yeah.
That'll be me.
Wow.
So he used those threats, the intimidation, and then he uses isolation, and he begins to tear down all of her support system and
Okay.
locks her into him to where he becomes the only one who she gets any information from. And he becomes like omnipotent or godly in her eyes because she doesn't have anybody else to bounce.
Because he included her. They've gone through this grooming type of process. She's probably given up friends. I see that happen a lot, just because he was overpowering and he was demanding and he was possessive and he wanted her time. And all the while she's thinking, he really loves me. He just loves me so much. He just wants me, wants me, wants me. And here it is. She really is alone in a sense because she's kind of assisted unwittingly in that isolation process. Would that be fair to say? Yeah.
Well, what happens is he makes it seem like everybody else is wrong and he's right.
Right.
So the only persons that she can go to for the answers to any of her concerns or questions.
The right answers.
Right. Are his answers.
Right. Wow.
And then he may use outside sources to buttress his arguments.
Okay.
And I see this with abusers that use what we call spiritual abuse, where they'll call on the Bible. They'll only allow her to go to certain churches that he is in agreement with, and then he'll reinforce whatever messages that are coming from the church to buttress his position. And the more that he continues to keep her attention strictly on what he wants, the more he's then in control of her. So the misnomer about domestic violence, and this is an important misconception that a lot of people have, is that it has to be physical. I've worked with women in relationships where there was never any physical violence. But there was...
So they never were hit?
They were never hit.
Okay.
But there were threats. There was that terror there. And we call that coercive controlling violence without physical violence.
So it's still considered domestic violence, is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
And we're actually shifting terminology to be more accurate by using the terms coercive control.
So when you say we, who are you referring to? Just the general public?
I'm referring the researchers, the
experts in this,
providers, the professional community.
Okay.
Is trying to shift that, and Evan Stark had a big impact on renaming domestic violence so that we could look at coercive controlling violence. And if you look at the power and control wheel that was developed out of the Duluth project,
right,
and there are 8 spokes in that wheel
Mm-hmm.
that look at all different types of coercive controlling violence, and there's a circle around it that has physical violence and sexual violence on it. What we've neglected to educate professionals as well as lay people about is that domestic violence includes all of those spokes inside that wheel.
That wheel cannot go without the spokes.
No, we definitely need to look at all of those spokes.
Yes.
And we have to go beyond what's happening in the present relationship. Because if she gets out and she separates from the abuser and they have children together, then he starts using the children as a manipulation factor to keep her controlled.
I want to touch on that because that's what I see all the time. First, I see if they weren't punched in the face, if there's not a black eye, if they chose because they were in the midst of this unbelievable coercion, that they could not break free, and they didn't call the police, and then the bruises go away, and then they come to their senses, and they say, my gosh, I'm recognizing something. I listened to I spoke with Dr. Debra Wingfield, and I understand now what kind of very unhealthy relationship I've been in. And they go to the police or they go to the family courts because they do share children. I've seen so many cases where nobody believes them. They say, okay, where's the evidence? Did you call the police? Did you press charges? And no, none of the above. But it really happened. And they are then looked at as a manipulator for a manipulative goal to gain custody of their shared children. And I can't tell you how many. Now, not to say, folks, and I want to be clear, that some women don't manipulate the system and use this and lie and use this very scenario that is very factual to their advantage, because that does happen as well. But the other side, the truth really exists. Tell us about, what do? You don't have any more bruises. How do you convince somebody? It's almost like I've seen women try so desperately to convince Dr. Deborah that they look like they're trying to manipulate, and they're not. What advice can you give to these women? Because it's a really dire and desperate situation.
Well, it is. And I want to step back for a minute because I want people to understand that there's actual research, and you can look at Barry Goldstein's book, where they have found that false allegations of domestic violence occur in about 2% of the cases coming from women, and about 16% of the cases coming from men.
Right, I've seen that.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is women very seldom make false allegations, whereas men make more false allegations in an effort to gain custody of their children.
Now,
so
because we started late, unfortunately, and we have a lot more to cover. Would it be fair to say that when these abusers reach that level and the woman wants to escape and she can't bring herself to escape, she doesn't feel like she has anywhere to go, she might not be working, and she's kind of stuck there, and do you find, or have you seen through your research and your years of work and expertise that if she stands up for herself, if she gets out and leaves and is able to escape, that the abuse goes and kind of passes on to the child that then is used as a pawn? I mean,
Okay,
some people
well,
say, listen, he abused her. I get it. It was an unhealthy relationship, but he loves his daughter. He loves his son. And it was specific to her and not abuse. What is your take on that?
okay, well, first of all, just because they've separated and divorced doesn't mean the abuse stops. He doesn't stop abusing her, and that's a misconception.
Okay.
He just finds other ways to use coercive control with her.
Okay.
And that's where we really have to help judges and attorneys and guardian ad litems and custody evaluators understand that just because the two of them are separated doesn't mean the coercive control has stopped. It has
Right.
not. And the reality is that more often than not, it continues in different ways, including
Go ahead.
taking her back to court multiple times using legal abuse.
That's exactly. I mean, if we're going to, expand the category of DV, then let's expand it properly. And what I see a lot is I see what I refer to it, and I think it's referred to generally, litigation abuse.
Right.
They
So
know
we
that it's
have,
putting the mom through hell. They know that she can't afford it. They know that she can't miss work. They're not paying child support. And guys, I don't mean to pick on you. This is a show about a specific category. The numbers speak for themselves. What can I say? But the reality is, she then gets abused through a system. And the system, Dr. Wingfield, correct me if I'm wrong, helps the abuser.
in more cases than not, the system is colluding, maybe unknowingly, because
Yes.
judges don't understand this yet. That's why I'm writing the current book that I'm writing, because we need to get the professionals that are working in the family courts educated about coercive control. And until they understand the dynamics that are going on and the repeated patterns, they're not going to see that, and they're not going to see the impact not only on the victim survivor, but they're not going to see the impact on the children.
Right.
And you had asked earlier about the children, so I wanted to come back to that.
Okay.
One of the
you.
things that we do know is these children not only learn from the abuser how to either abuse or be abused, but they will go on into their adult relationship and continue to carry out those patterns. And we really have to understand what we're doing to children in the family court system when we send them to live with the abusive parent.
Please talk about that, because I just have a horrific case right now, and I know how many other women do. I don't personally, folks, but I'm working with a parent with a horrific case. Tell us about that. And we're short on time, and I still want to talk about your book. And folks, well, wait a minute. Before you even tell us about that, give us the name of your book.
Okay, the book that I wrote for protective parents is
Yes.
Eyes Wide Open.
Eyes Wide Open.
And then the subtitle is Help with Control Freak Co-Parents.
God only knows.
So,
we all know control freak co-parents, folks. So, Dr. Wingfield, you have offered, and I'm just delighted at this, to give one of your books, to do a giveaway and give one of your books away to somebody who really needs this information and needs to be apprised of what's happening. So, John, and a signed copy nonetheless. So,
That's
John,
correct.
maybe we can, whoever is, I don't know, John, you pick a number because you're just a champ at this. Pick a number, whoever comes on the chat room, in the next 5 minutes, and it's their number, whatever, then get their information, pass it along to Dr. Wingfield, and she will send you out, folks, a signed copy of her book. And you don't want to, if you're in any type of a dysfunctional relationship, even if you don't recognize it, but you recognize something in your gut is saying, gee, I hope he changes. I hope that things change. I hope that it's just, some phase he's going through. But something is saying, red flag, red light, watch out, stop. Even though you're not listening, read this book before you go deep down the rabbit hole and there's no climbing out until you're in the midst of hell. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I had to get all that out quick because we're limited on time. Eyes wide open, help with control freak co-parents. And here in California, folks, the friendly parent, regardless of the allegations, is the parent more apt to have custody of the child. Who's the friendly parent? Who's better? Who's a better presenter, Dr. Wingfield, a narcissist or the victim?
Well, I don't want to say all abusers are narcissists, so let's just say the abuser or the victim.
Or the victim.
And the abuser is definitely the one that has many years of showing the image that he wants to show to the public. So he presents well in court, she does not.
Right.
And this is part of what we have to help judges understand. And we have to help the attorneys understand, as well as the evaluators. She is going she's going to look
crazy. I mean,
well,
I don't want to say...
Not always crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, not always crazy. A lot of times what she looks like is very submissive and very withdrawn in the courtroom, because even in the courtroom, he's sending her intimidating looks. He's making intimidating gestures. He's making low sounds with his voice that she is very well aware of. And she's reading his body language, and he's intimidating her to the point where she's afraid if she says anything that it will be taken out on her. And he'll find a way to do that. Maybe not through the legal system.
Right.
Maybe he'll do it with the brainwashing of the children.
Right. Somebody just asked, why don't judges know this? I mean, the research is out there. We've got the ACE study. We've got so much evidence. We've got different labels, and we've got coercive now being brought in. And why don't judges know this?
Okay. First of all, judges rely on a statute. And if the statute doesn't have the words "in the best interest of the child" section that includes domestic violence with coercion and control, then the judges go with physical violence as the only type of violence that they are going to consider as domestic violence. And then that has to have law enforcement involvement and protection orders and the whole legal system involved.
So even if there was physical violence, they have to have called and they have to have followed through, or it's a
Or
no-go.
judges.
Yeah.
Right. And in my book, Eyes Wide Open, I actually have checklists in every chapter that describes each different type of coercive control that will allow her to talk with her attorney about what exactly happened and describe his behaviors in detail.
Okay.
So that the attorney can then show the coercion to the judge. But if the attorney doesn't have that information and she doesn't know how to express it to the attorney, then the attorney doesn't get it. And it doesn't come up to the judge. So there are many layers that still have to happen to get judges not only understanding this, but listening for these kinds of things when it's presented in court.
Right. Okay. Okay. Makes sense.
So we have a ways to go on this.
A long ways to go. But, I started just looking, and I want to encourage people to look at your court website. I mean, most states now, if not all, they have some type of a self-help. And if you look at the website, or even, wherever you have to look in your state to get this information, there are definitions for what that particular state considers to be domestic violence. And it's never just striking, hitting, punching, kicking. There's always more to it. There's always the mental violence, the emotional, the psychological, the, oh gosh, it just goes so much deeper. So, I mean, I want to encourage anybody who, if you're in this situation, or if you're not even sure that you're in this situation, but you feel something that just does not feel right, just look at the definitions within your state for what the court will consider DV.
And that's true.
Yeah.
You can find that in the state statutes.
Okay.
So if you Google your state statutes and then put in your search term domestic violence or domestic abuse, then you should be able to see what exactly the state defines as domestic violence or domestic abuse.
Perfect. I want to talk about your new book because we're going to run out of time soon. We're gonna have to have you back on because so many people really need your help, and they're texting and they're writing and they're saying they have so many questions, but we don't have enough time. This is such a major topic in this country and beyond. We know that, but specific to this country that we're addressing today. Tell us about your new book, please.
My new book is called Evidence Uncovered.
One more time. Wait a minute. Say the name again.
Evidence Uncovered.
Okay.
Non-physical domestic violence allegations.
Perfect.
And that book is expected to be out after the first of the year.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure when, but it's in process, and it's coming along just as quickly as I can get that done.
Well, listen, we are anxiously, impatiently waiting because everybody who is in a relationship, whether they recognize it or not, they really do need to understand, and they can understand better by reading. If they can't go to meetings, if they can't talk to the girlfriends or the male friends, if they are so isolated, then at least they can read about this to gain some some teeth, some strength, some understanding. I mean, because what else do they do?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I'm writing about this, because we have to get this out in every form that we can. And
Yes,
I would be happy to come back on your program, Tammy, and talk more about this. Just
I'm so sorry for I know we're barely touching on anything. So I mean, if you had to give a prediction when your new book is going to come out, between even a 3 or 4 month period or a 6 month period or a year, what would you say there's a high probability that you will be finished when? Give people some hope.
I would say by April of next year, if not before.
Perfect. You're training therapists currently, is that correct?
That's correct. And I also have training available for attorneys, psychologists who are doing
work with
custody
clients.
Evaluation.
Sure. Okay. All right. So then we need your website. Give the listeners that information. We're going to run out of time in a moment.
Okay. The website is houseofpeacepubs, PUBS.com.
House of Peace, folks. Peace that we all need. House of Peace Pubs, short for publications. Okay? House of Peace Pubs at .com. Oh, we're hearing something. Okay.
Right. I'm just going to get that out of the room.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was the studio, if that was you. Okay. House of Peace Pubs, folks. Pubs is short for publications, which is what she's offering along with. So if you are a therapist, if you are a judge, if you are an attorney, and you think you know, but you're not quite sure, Dr. Debra Wingfield is an expert who has over 4 decades, actually, of experience in this. Okay, she started right out of the womb. She's very young. That's a joke. We need a little humor here, folks. She's beautiful. She's very kind. I've spoken with her not because I'm a victim of DV, but because I deal with so many people that are victims, and she is just so easy to speak with. Folks, I encourage you. Can we have an email address, or do you just suggest that they go to your website?
If they go to my website, there's an email address there.
Okay, wonderful. Folks, one more time, www.house, House, of peace, PEACE, pubs, P like Paul, U, B like boy, S.com. Go there, take a look. Actually, I know because I went there, you get a freebie just for going. Okay, so she already gives you something. John, do we have a winner for her book? And unfortunately, folks, along with my technical difficulties, I cannot even. John, if you can, no, he might not be able to. Let's see. Okay. Well, we will find out. I know that we have a winner. I don't have the, the capabilities right now with my technology because I'm having all sorts of stuff happen to see the winner. Dr. Wingfield, John will send you over the name of the person that is the lucky person who's going to receive this signed copy. I don't know if you're online right now, if you're watching the chat room, are you?
I am.
Okay, do you see, because I don't even have access to that right now. My technology is really not doing very well.
Okay. And right now there's nothing up there that shows
says
who it is. So
okay. Oh well, he
I'll-
won't give the real details because that's confidential, and we don't give personal information. But at least we'll give a first name. Okay. So if you don't see something up there, please know that we are going to send you a name, folks. Dr. Debra Wingfield. Last comments.
Tammy, this is just such a huge issue that so many people are uninformed about, and we just need to keep bringing information out until everyone really has a deep understanding of what coercive control is.
Absolutely. Dr. Debra, thank you for joining me today on the National Safe Child Show. Folks, thank you for listening to us, and thank you for please go on her website, take a look. This is a large issue. We've got a 50% divorce rate, and it's not going to go away until people become educated, and quite frankly, until the professionals become educated. So
exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I'd love to have you on again very soon. Keep working on that book. We're excited.
I will.
We're waiting and anticipating its completion. Okay, folks, thanks for joining us. The National Safe Child Show. God bless you. Be safe. Don't get involved with a coercive, controlling freak. It'll cost you a good portion of your life. God bless. National Safe Child Show. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the National Safe Child Show on UBN Radio. For past episodes, visit the archives on ubnradio.com. And for more information, go to nationalsafechildcoalition.com. The views and opinions expressed in these radio programs are those of the individual hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of University